Hi, and welcome back to the Battle Against Extinction. We continue our story now with Chapter 1. If you like this story, click the like button, and if you wish to be notified, click the bell. Now sit back, relax, and let's continue the story. Chapter 1, The Awakening of Debediah. It was a warm summer morning. The sun had just begun to rise. The flowers were in bloom, and the birds were singing with glee. Debediah, the snow-white unicorn with the golden horn and gem-blue eyes, awoke from her deep sleep. Debediah pulled herself up from her bed made of grass and twigs and went for a walk. While Debediah was walking, she heard a wise old owl telling her young a story about unicorns. Debediah was surprised to hear the story her mother had told her before she died. Debediah stopped and looked up into the old oak tree which stood tall and proud. She called up to the owl. The owl glanced at Debediah from her well-guarded nest. The owl asked, "What do you want?" Debediah replied, "Who told you that story?" The owl responded with a huff, "No one told me. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes." Debediah said, "You mean there is a black unicorn with flames in his eyes and a horn made of fire?" The owl, losing patience, answered in a stern voice, "Yes, it is all true, my child. Now be off with you. Leave my family and I out of it." Debediah walked over to a tall pine tree that gave her shade from the blazing sun. She sat down. There she stayed for some time thinking about the story. It came time for her to realize that she must find the black unicorns. That way they would become one and continue the bloodline of their species throughout time. Debediah was not sure where to start. She only had two choices. One choice was the Hills of Darkness. The other place was the Forest of Death. The Hills of Darkness were always dark. The sun never shone. As far as Debediah knew, nothing could live there. She could always go to the Forest of Death. The only things that lived there were the gruesome, blood-sucking animals from hell. When Debediah was young, she had walked by the Forest of Death. While she walked by, she heard something behind her. It sounded like someone crying out for help with their last breath. Debediah turned towards the sound. All she could see was a large spiny bush with spots of blood on it. She started to push the branches apart when suddenly a young man came flying out. Debediah jumped back, and a young man fell in front of her. He reached for her and said, "Help me." Debediah leaned down beside him. The young man was covered in deep claw marks. Half of his hair on his head was pulled out. Debediah was surprised that he had made it this far. She laid by his head. He could barely pull his weary body up and across her back. Debediah lifted herself up slowly and walked home carefully. As Debediah approached the cave she called home, she saw her mother Kendra standing outside of the cave. Debediah yelled to her mother, "I need some help. I found this poor wounded creature by the Forest of Death." Kendra did not like humans, and she had good reason for her dislike. But maybe this human would be different. The last human she had encountered had killed so many of their kind. Kendra also knew her time in this world was coming to an end. Debediah would be alone. Kendra walked over to Debediah and said, "Bring him into our cave. I will go and gather some twigs and grass to make a bed for him." Debediah's mother went right to work, running in and out of the cave, hauling in twigs and grass. She placed everything in a small corner of the cave and told Debediah to place him on the bed. Debediah walked over to the bed her mother had made and leaned down beside it. Debediah slowly rolled her body over so the man would slide off her back. The man fell into a deep sleep. Debediah looked at the man and then at her mother and asked, "Do you know what it is?" Kendra looked at Debediah and replied, "It is a male human." Debediah looked at her puzzled. "Kendra," God whispered to Debediah, "Come, my child, let him rest now." Debediah went and lay down beside her mother in their bed. The bed was just big enough for the two of them. Kendra sighed and said, "Debediah, my dear child, there is something I must tell you that I have been keeping inside for a long time. I feel you are ready to know the truth. At one time, not too long ago, there were thousands of unicorns until a human female appeared with her evil, ugly small creatures. We called them the evil ones. They came and tried to destroy all the unicorns. They almost did, but 4 of us managed to escape. The 4 that escaped was you, your father, a young male named Rebel, and me. We were short on food, and one of us would have to go out and find food. Your father would not let me go because you were too young to be without a mother. Your father decided he would go because he knew how to avoid the traps. The young male Rebel would not hear of it. Rebel attacked your father and knocked him out. Before I could stop him, he ran out of the cave. On his way back, the evil ones found and captured him. He had no chance once they saw him. They threw chains around his neck, and the leader of the evil ones, known as the Temptress, put him under a sleeping spell, so he would not break the chains. Then she put him under another spell as he slept. When he awoke, she had full power over him. She had changed his appearance. He was black, and his horn and eyes were made of flames. He was no longer white with blue eyes and a horn made of gold. Your father died 5 years later in his sleep. He was very old. It was his time. Zebediah, her mother, said, "It is time for us to get some sleep. Close those big blue eyes of yours, my child, and always remember that I love you with all my heart and soul." The night was cold and dark. The moon was full as Zebediah's mother kissed her child for the last time before she closed her eyes and went into an endless sleep. Morning came and the birds were singing their goodbye song. Zebediah woke with a jolt. She heard that song only one time before. She looked up at her mother. Kendra had died in the night. Zebediah pushed her mother, trying to wake her up, hoping that the song was not to her mother. But Kendra did not wake up. Zebediah pushed her body into her mother, nuzzling her, and began to cry. The mother she had loved more than life itself was no more. Zebediah went out to find a place for her mother to rest. She found a big, beautiful rose bush in bloom. This is where her mother would sleep for eternity, under the rose bush. Zebediah walked back into the cave and laid down by the young man. She would not leave his side. 2 weeks later, the young man woke up. When he first saw the snow-white unicorn, he jumped. Zebediah looked at him and said, "Don't be afraid. I brought you here and will not hurt you. My name is Zebediah." The young man crawled to the edge of his bed and reached his hand out to Zebediah and asked, "Is this a dream, or did you just speak to me?" Zebediah replied, "No, you are not dreaming. I speak many different languages." The young man sat for a minute before he spoke. The young man replied, "My name is Thorlin." Zebediah and Thorlin became dear friends. They would go for long walks together. Zebediah would teach him about the animals and the plants of the forest. 3 years passed when one day Zebediah noticed Thorlin was not looking well. The medicine plants were no longer working that kept the poison from the creatures from the forest of death from killing him. The poison from these creatures could never be cured, but with special plants you could keep death at bay for a time. The poison had now gone through his whole body and was taking him away from her. A week later, he died in his sleep. Zebediah placed him beside her mother under the rose bush. Well, this ends Chapter 1 of the Battle Against Extinction. If you'd like to hear more about Zebediah's adventures, please let me know. I hope you all enjoyed this story as much as I enjoyed creating it.